I would now like to call to the podium our chair of the day, Richard Parker, to take over today's meeting and introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, President Carroll. Rotarians and guests, today we are delighted to have as our guest speaker, Sherri Bruinhout, who is the CEO of Launch Housing. In Victoria, there's a broad network of government and non-government agencies who provide support, but Launch is the preeminent agency providing first contact frontline services for homelessness. Our club has had a relationship with Launch and its predecessor agencies that go back nearly 20 years and maybe longer. Our Make a Home project has been going for 8 years, and in that time, through Launch, we've assisted several hundred individuals and families. And today we've got, this is Chris Wong's a brilliant idea, we brought in a pair of boxes to open them up and just show you what's in those. And that almost monthly shopping expedition is what we do. We gather at Kmart and Moonee Ponds, and that's the end result. And then they're packed and delivered to the various where Launch want them delivered to in terms of their frontline offices. Around 15 years ago, well before Maha was started, members like Phil Endersby and James Puller, who no longer he's with us but no longer a member, were involved in with Launch's predecessor in the creation of homegrown real estate, which from there became a new division of Launch and quite innovative in an Australian housing agency context. Around that time, Rotary Club of Melbourne also organised other projects like hands-on working bee assistance with the furniture fit-out of the Common Ground Crisis Accommodation Centre in Elizabeth Street. About 4 years ago, we also helped with the fitting out of some parts of the refuge, a new refuge, interesting architecturally, in Dandenong, a new Launch refuge, which was for domestic violence victims and their kids and families. For the last part of her talk today, Sherri is going to hand over to Faith Wells, who's with us. Faith, and when we were sitting this, I didn't quite know what Faith was going to talk about, but I'm really pleased because Faith is going to talk to you about the people that get allocated our boxes, the sort of reaction that they have to them, and how it all comes together. Sherri was quite clear to me earlier, saying she's in the senior management role running the place, but it's Faith who sees the actual day-to-day issue. So without further ado, could I ask Sherri to come up and talk to us?
So lovely to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, President Carroll and Chairperson Richard for today. Launch Housing. We are unapologetically about ending homelessness in Melbourne. That's what we do. We don't run childcare centres. We don't do disability support. We are a community service organisation that is absolutely on about ending homelessness. And we do it because we know we can. Our vision at Launch Housing is that we strongly believe that housing affords people dignity. And housing is a human right, and that dignity should be afforded to every single person who wants it. Launch Housing, we're about 70 years old. We're the largest funded organisation in Victoria providing homelessness support services. We've got about 400 staff, about 14,000 people come through our programs a year. Every single night, 220 people are accommodated in crisis accommodation through Launch Housing, and about 4,000 people a year find their forever homes through Launch Housing. So why are we cranky about homelessness? About 2 weeks, I'm the CEO of Launch Housing, but every month or so I go and work a shift in direct service. And about 2 weeks ago, I was in our South Bank services, which is a 60-bed crisis facility down in South Bank. And I met a woman there who was in her 70s. She'd become homeless because the house that she was renting with her partner, after he passed away, that house just became too expensive. In the private rental market, that house was okay. It was now about $750 a week. She'd been in that house for decades. She didn't tell her family that she was struggling. She let the property go because she couldn't afford to pay the rent anymore. She tried to go into student housing. She thought a share house might be a good thing for her. She went to an interview with 3 young 20-year-olds who had put a sign up looking for a housemate, and she responded to that. And they ridiculed her. So she ended up with us. We've found her a beautiful new home, and I can't wait till she gets her pack from Rotary Melbourne to welcome her into her new home when she moves out of our crisis accommodation. So we're cranky about homelessness, but that person is one person. If we look at the amount of people that come into homelessness services every year, we could fill the MCG. Fill it. Over 100,000 people are looking for homelessness supports in Victoria alone every year. And do you know, when people start rough sleeping, so sleeping out under cover, out without cover, their life expectancy drops by 30 years. And do you know that Aboriginal people in Victoria have 10 times as much representation in homelessness than non-Aboriginal people? Do you know that in the last year alone, people coming to homelessness services with jobs jumped from 16% to 25%? When housing is out of the reach of working Victorians, we've got a trouble. So that's why we are unashamedly cranky about homelessness. But I'm not here to tell you all the doom and gloom. Yes, it's a wicked issue. Yes, we've got problems. But there are some green shoots. There are things that are working and that are being magnificent, and you are part of that. So what we thought we might do today is Faith is going to talk to you about the packs that we are working in partnership with Rotary to be supporting people who are experiencing one of the worst events of their life to get back on their feet. And then after Faith, I'm going to come back and talk to you a little bit about what I'm seeing at the policy environment and the strategic environment through Victoria and where our efforts are going into the future. So let me introduce Faith. She's going to tell you a little bit about what she does at Launch and the programs that she's working on.
Hey guys, thank you for having me. I'm Faith. I've worked at Launch Housing for coming up 7 years now. I work in a program called the Education Pathways Program. What that means is I work closely with families and children who are experiencing homelessness just to engage and remain engaged in education through that homelessness journey. Just to give, I guess, a bit of an explanation around the housing in case you guys aren't aware. So the crisis housing where people usually start is like short term. It's where families are placed straight away, and that we aim to kind of have those families in there for around 3 months before we can provide them either more stable temporary housing or onto their forever long-term homes. So what day-to-day, what my job looks like is I work with the families to build those relationships with schools, but also just to ensure that they have that specialist support through family violence, mental health, and additional support learning needs as well. And it also means that because I'm kind of working with the family on things that kind of go alongside housing, I get to stay involved even after they move in. One of my favorite parts of the job is getting to go and see a family after they've moved into their forever home. So the difference is huge. It goes beyond the house. And when I was thinking about who to talk about today, there was one family in particular that came to mind. They were living in a motel after fleeing an unsafe environment at home. And mum had spent countless times crying to me about whether or not she'd made the right decision, second guessing and holding all of this guilt and a lot of shame because she'd taken away so much from her children. So they'd lost their clothes, their bedrooms, their school, their friends. And she'd mentioned small things that you guys probably don't even think about. Like, I definitely didn't consider it before moving into this sector. Things like the ability to cook her children's favorite meals at the end of the day, coming home from school and just eating together as a family. In the emergency accommodation that families are usually placed in straight away, it's often motels that have very limited cooking facilities. So families often just have to kind of make do with the fast food options that are available nearby. When she moved into her new home, it was the kitchen that she was most excited about. One of the things that's always so relieving is that we get to move these families into homes with all of the essential items included. So they're not just walking into an empty shelf, but she has the utensils, the bedding, the towels. It saves her that dreaded journey to Kmart. These things add up. Like $200 to us might not seem too much, but for her, that's, let's say, 30% of her payments for that week. But also, no one wants to be stood in an aisle in Kmart mentally checking off what you need to buy to fill your home, but you've got two kids playing the floor is lava next door, and then trying to figure out how you're going to cart it all back on public transport afterwards. After the first visit, I rocked up, and at the door I was greeted by the two kids who were frantically fighting to get to be the one to show me their new bedroom, excitedly pointing out who had managed to bagsy the top bunk and who had the new bluey duvet cover. I was then given the grand tour of the house, which included them opening up every single cupboard in the house to show me that they all had something in it. I've never seen a 6-year-old so excited about pots and pans before. Every visit from then on, Mum always had fresh treats and the strongest jug of Ethiopian coffee you've ever had in your life. And as someone that has a very weak caffeine intolerance, I protested a lot. But being able to provide that house, it showed me that we're providing more than housing. We're providing the ability for parents to care and to cook and to love their families in the ways that they want to. So often, it's single mums, and they work so hard trying to shield their children from the worst of it. I've worked with a mum who had fled an unsafe environment at home and was living in her car with her children, yet they had almost perfect school attendance. I always cry at this point because it was like hard working with her. And I've also worked with a mum who told me a story about a time when they were in a house with no electricity. So she'd made it an adventure with camping torches and blanket forts. These parents worked so hard to keep things normal for their families. I can't count to you the number of parents who have cried to me, thanking us for providing the stability and the space for connection again. When they move into their new house and it's obvious that people care, that the small things have been considered and we get to take away the stress and let families fall back into their familiar routines again. I feel really lucky to work with the cohort that I do, and I feel grateful every time I'm given the opportunity to speak to you guys about the impact and the experiences I get to witness. So thank you.
Isn't she fantastic? There's 400 of them just like that at Launch Housing, passionate, engaged in what they're doing every day. Now, there's a reason why they call homelessness a wicked issue. It's tough. It's been tough for a while. It's a hard issue to solve. But if I came here to tell you that that it's a wicked issue and that we're struggling, that would be right. But if I left you with the impression that we can't solve it, that would be a great injustice, because we can. There are some programs and responses that we know work. So there's a program called Housing First. Now, Housing First is a particular program that works for people who are rough sleeping. So not everyone experiencing homelessness is sleeping in the street. Some people are couch surfing, some people are staying temporarily with friends, some people, like Faith's family, are staying in a hotel being supported. But there are some people that are rough sleeping. Generally, the impacts of rough sleeping are devastating on people's health, on their mental health and on their wellbeing, on their connection to communities. There is a program called Housing First. Now, I've been very fortunate in my career. I've done nothing but work in homelessness my whole career, and I've been very fortunate. I went over to America and looked at homelessness responses in America. And in America, for rough sleepers, if you want a bed for the night, you have to do a urine test in some places to make sure you're not on drugs. Or you have to go to church and take communion in order to get a bed for the night. So there's a lot of prerequisites that are expected of people to get a bed for the night. Housing First is a model in Australia that says, do you know what? We will give you a house, and once you're in that house, we will pile the support that you need around you to get better. You don't need to be straight to move into a house. You don't need to be well behaved to move into a house. You don't need to be believing in one God or another to move into a house. You deserve a house because it's your human right to have a house, and we will pile the support around you. And what do you know? With Housing First, 90% of people who go through a Housing First program never go back into rough sleeping. And that's because when they get the house, they get the detox, and they decide that detox is a choice that they want to make. Or they get the mental health services, or they can get to the pharmacist to get their mental health meds. Things in their life start coming back together. They have access to their family again. They have pride, they have dignity. So over 90% of people who have been rough sleeping through Housing First never come back into homelessness. I want to tell you about another program that's working really well, and that's the youth foyers. And the home packs go into our youth foyers. So if you think about your own kids, nephews, nieces, family, when a young person is at that time in their life where they're sort of teenagers, early 20s, we don't say to the people in our families, you know what, drop out of school, it's fine. You know what, don't get a job, it's fine. We don't do that. Yet for people who have had that disruption of homelessness, often those young people don't finish school, they don't have a job, they don't have a career, and it's not okay. So youth foyers are 40-bed student housing for young people who have experienced homelessness, who have had that trauma and that really unfair, rough start. And that program, the deal of that program is, come on into the youth foyer, but you know what? You are going to go to school. You are going to get a job. You are going to have a career, and you're going to have the career that you want to have. And we're going to move mountains to make that happen. And the youth foyers, we've found the evidence in those programs is those young people do go on to have careers. They do go on to have stable housing and stable relationships. And do you know what? Of the people who are rough sleeping, over 80% of people who are rough sleeping as adults experience homelessness as children and teenagers. We want to stop that. We want to break that circuit, and the youth foyers are a way that we're doing that. And the support of Melbourne Rotary is fitting out those home packs to every single student that moves into those foyers. It's pretty remarkable. Prior to coming to launch, I've headed up homelessness policy for the Victorian State Government. And I thought I might talk to you just a little bit about what's happening in that policy realm. So there's terrific evidence about what ends homelessness. The challenge that we have as a community, as a state, is that stable housing with support is what ends homelessness. There's about 82,000 public and community housing homes available in this state. So about 82,000 houses that are available. The waiting list is currently sitting at 57,000 people waiting. Almost half of that list are homeless. So our issue is we are very good, we have a beautiful history in this state of construction of houses, and we were asleep on the job for the last 30 years or so, and we're paying the price for that now. But there's been enormous strides going forward at both a state and federal level to get more housing built, to build more housing and to make that housing available. And we've got some people here today who are part of that work, getting those houses made. When I was head of policy for homelessness, I often had to go and talk to Cabinet to ask for investment. And without, of course, breaking Cabinet in confidence, what I can tell you is I never walked away from that meeting without having something. I never walked away empty-handed when I asked for help. And the reason why is because homelessness has an evidence base that works. So we know that when these programs are put into place, that they will receive an outcome for people to end homelessness. Department of Treasury knows it, Department of Premier and Cabinet know it, and the evidence is irrefutable. The return on investment, put the moral question aside about whether or not it's the right thing to do, the return on investment for government can't be refuted, and Department of Treasury are well aware of it. So I never walked away from Cabinet empty-handed. I never got everything I wanted, but mind you, I was always asking for a lot, but I never walked away empty-handed. So there are programs and responses that we know work, that we know are good value for money, and that we know we need to take to scale. And I've just named two of them today in Housing First employers, but there are many there. So that's why I want to leave you with that sense of there are solutions to ending homelessness. Government can't do it on its own, and it won't do it on its own. Launch housing, we absolutely can't do it on its own. The partnership that we have with Melbourne Rotary since 2006 has been quite remarkable. And I think there's a lot for you to be proud of. It's supported hundreds of people to make their house a home. The hampers that are purchased and packed and delivered to 4 sites around launch housing, around 120 of these packs per year, provide these really important items that you just need when you're moving into a home. There's pots, pans, glasswares, you can see it for yourself, bedding, towels. The packing boxes are all donated by Wilson Storage. And Chris from Rotary team donated his warehouse to the space in Sunshine. Is Chris here today?
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I'm sure we're filling up a nice corner of that warehouse in Sunshine. Thank you. The volunteers that then pack those boxes and donate and deliver them to the 4 sites where they sit until we have the person that's ready to move in, but we go through those boxes very quickly. The other support that we receive from Melbourne Rotary is through the youth foyers, as I was saying. Every single student that moves into their new home gets a pack and makes them feel like it's new. Some of those people that are receiving these packs have never had something new in a box before. Rotary also supports us providing some pet items to our Harris Transportable, to our tiny home program in the past, which we've been incredibly grateful for. And in 2023, 2024 and 2025, you've picked up and delivered the toy drives that allow people to choose presents for their children at Christmas and have the dignity of giving to their kids at Christmas. So we're incredibly grateful to you, to your commitment to ending homelessness alongside us. And congratulations on the impact that you've had, particularly with launch since 2026, but the impact that you continue to have to Victorians in need. We are very grateful and we're very delighted in the partnership that we have had. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sherri. That was great. And thank you, Faith, also. We've got a few minutes for questions. So can we, we've got the mic over here. Over to you. Just a few minutes. Peter?
So, congratulations, both of you, on a very good presentation. Can you tell us how it actually works at night in Melbourne with homeless people, say in Flinders Street near the station? Often you see a couple of station wagons parked there. Who are they and where do the people go to? Can you tell us how it works?
Yeah, of course. Great question, Peter. So you might be surprised to know that for every person rough sleeping in Melbourne, we know their name, we know their story, we know how they got rough sleeping, we know how that happened, but most importantly, we know what the plan is to get them out of rough sleeping. Every single person, I can tell you, last night, 132 people were rough sleeping in Melbourne. So what generally happens is it's called a by name list. So the way you end homelessness is one person at a time. That's the only way you can do it. So, and you can't end homelessness if you don't know who is homeless. So those people that are rough sleeping down here, there are some charities and other services, generally church-based services, that come down with food in the evening time. People know who they are. This is not too much information, but the police, there are particular charities that help young people. They attract other people who prey on young people, so the police are very interested in that. And there's a real role to be making sure that those places are safe for everyone. But generally people who are rough sleep for about between 4 to 12 months before that plan to end their rough sleeping can be put into place, and we can create a pathway for them. So there are for people who are rough sleeping, those housing first programs are critical. In Victoria, there's 500 housing first programs, places. 500 people can get a housing first program, which there's about 6,000 people rough sleeping in Victoria each year. So it just sort of gives you an idea of the demand far exceeds the supply.
We've got time for two more questions.
I've got one. Everyone knows we've got such a chronic shortage of properties that are available. And one of the things that I sometimes say to myself is that over time people's circumstances change, and you may have been in a situation of domestic violence, end up with a government house, etc. And later on you find another partner, kids start to grow up, etc. And I dare say people then don't put their hand up to say, we're ready to move on. But I'm just wondering, how do we make sure that people who can move on do move on, to create the opportunity for someone who's sleeping in their car?
Philip, such a great question. What comes to my mind is there's two things really. One is, how do we stop people who shouldn't be going into social housing not going in the first place? And that's where programs like Youth Foyer are really important. So if we look at young people in their late teens or early 20s, we don't aspire for them to become lifelong social housing residents, because when you live in social housing, compared to the Victorian average, you are more likely to be sick, uneducated, unemployed, and criminalised. Now, I'm not making a judgment. I'm saying that's what the data says. So for young people, we want them to be in jobs. We want them to have their own properties. We want them to be in private rental. We want them to have that chance. Underutilisation is a really big issue in social housing, where, you know, someone's raised their kids, they've got a 4-bedroom house, kids have grown up and moved on, and now they're rattling around in that 4-bedroom home, but it's their family home and they've been there for many years. It's a tricky issue for governments to get their heads around. In the UK, in many of the housing associations in the UK, they've done figures. They offer a £5,000 reimbursement for every bedroom you give up when you downsize. And they've done the figures and realised that it's actually financially in their interest to pay that $5,000 to get that property back into circulation and offer a small one-bedder in return. So there's carrots and sticks. I think government's reluctant to use sticks to move people out of family homes, but there's some economic evidence that suggests that maybe carrots might be the way to go as well. It's a great question.
I think we could go on for longer, but we can't. We have to wind it up there for questions. Sherri, thank you very much. I think you can see from the questions and the interest in this, there's been a great success having both you and Faith here today. Anyone who'd like to donate for more tax, Chris Wong will be absolutely delighted.